Spotlight is proudly sponsored by HEC Media, St. Louis's home for arts, education, and culture.
Today on Spotlight, join the SWAT team and help experts track mosquitoes in the St. Louis area. Plus, a trailblazing speedboat racer whose accomplishments continue to inspire. And then from the largest aquariums in the world to the Smithsonian Space Museum, meet the local design company behind them all. But first, the legends born and made in the Gateway from St. Louis to Cooperstown. It's Sunday and you're watching the multiple Emmy Award-winning Spotlight.
Every year, hundreds of thousands of visitors make a pilgrimage to Cooperstown, New York. Some are there to watch exciting 12U baseball. Others visit what is perhaps the best-known sports shrine in the world, the Baseball Hall of Fame. You probably know many of the players inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame with St. Louis ties. Their heroics are legendary. Hornsby, Dean, Musial, Gibson, Brock. The images of those Cardinals players are painted on the left field wall in Busch Stadium.
Their retired numbers are painted on the wall, but there's only 13. There's 55 members of the Cardinal franchise in the Hall of Fame. So wait a minute, who are these other men?
And what about the 9 men from the American League's St. Louis Browns? Or the 37 members of the Negro Leagues in the Baseball Hall of Fame who also have St. Louis ties? Baseball historian Ed Wheatley wanted to know more, and now he's sharing the answers with baseball fans everywhere with his latest book, From St. Louis to Cooperstown, Legends Born and Made in the Gateway City.
Over 50% of the induction classes have had someone who has St. Louis roots that played here or grew up here. I grew up in baseball because of my dad. He played professional baseball. St. Louis had one of the greatest semi-pro leagues in the late 50s and early 60s than anywhere in the country, and I was a bat boy for those teams, and you just lived it. And it was also a time where baseball was always so special.
Wheatley's book is a treasure trove of nostalgia and trivia, intricately woven into the stories of some of St. Louis's most beloved players.
It's telling not only the history of who these individuals are, but it's a trip through the evolution of baseball, because we start all the way back in the 1880s with these players. And to be the greatest baseball town in America, you need to know the whole history, and that's why I wrote the book. So the pictures are fantastic. You're going to just create memories by reading the stories. Like, I remember that game, I remember that story, or this player, and they're all in there.
The book, filled with historical photos and trinkets of information, showed the journey of players who found their way from St. Louis to Cooperstown. One was named after a president and later played by a future president in a movie about his life story. Another held a distinction you may not have heard about.
He's sitting on 714.
In April 1974, Hank Aaron is chasing Babe Ruth's all-time career home run record. And the world is fixated on that. Well, as I was doing my research, I got one of those Harry Carey, holy cow moments, where there was a man who held that career home run record for over a quarter of a century, over 25 years before Babe Ruth. He was a part of the St. Louis Cardinals franchise. Roger Connor was the home run career leader before Babe Ruth. And so it's that depth of history and things that are exciting. Cool Papa Bell is just, one of those legacy players. It inducted him for his play in the Negro Leagues. He never made it to the major leagues because it was prior to Jackie Robinson's 1947 breaking the barrier. But they couldn't find him to tell him, you're inducted into the Hall of Fame. And they went a search across the city, and they found out he was a janitor over in City Hall, and he was down in the basement of City Hall, and that's how he found out he had been elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame. There's even one guy who had one game, 2 innings in one game, but he's in the Hall of Fame. And women, how does a player have 2 innings, but he makes it to the Hall of Fame. Those are what makes this great story in the book. This is just not about the Cardinals, and this takes nothing away. I'm here to promote the Cardinals as the second greatest team in the history of baseball. Only the Yankees have more world championships. But it's to remember the great men who played for the Browns over those 52 years. And there were 66 men who played for both teams. It's also, to me, so much about the Negro Leagues. And it's really something to teach this culture that we had here.
Wheatley, who still steps up to the plate in the senior leagues, loves talking with fellow baseball fans and sharing his research and experiences.
It's going back, reliving memories that you watched or you read about. And you do the same thing here in the St. Louis Baseball Hall of Fame here with the Cardinals. I mean, it's a walk down memory lane for anyone who just loves baseball.
HEC Media. Recognized, celebrated, honored time and again for excellence in the industry. Find all of the award-winning content at hecmedia.org.
It's all hands on deck, watching for mosquitoes, tracking them, trapping them, studying them. At St. Louis University, Professor Ricardo Ray is on the faculty at the College for Public Health and Social Justice.
Globally, vector-borne diseases carried by mosquitoes, kill up hundreds of thousands of people every year. This is, of course, primarily in Africa and in Latin America with malaria, dengue.
Which he says is part of the worry about mosquitoes, even here in St. Louis.
With climate change, the mosquito populations are shifting north. There's a potential for these diseases to come back. And in fact, they're in the southern parts of the states, in Florida and in Texas in the last couple of years, there has been identification of some of these diseases, including dengue and malaria.
Ray joined Mosquito Alert STL, partnering with the Missouri Botanical Gardens and St. Louis County's Department of Public Health. They are taking mosquito surveillance to the next level.
We need you to use your eyes, your brain, your smartphone
to help the public health department do the surveillance that we need to do to track the mosquito populations and then to see whether those diseases are coming, to help out our local public health agencies. Most notably at present in St. Louis, the West Nile virus is a very severe disease. Every year, there's a few dozen people who get it and who get it quite severely.
That's why it's important to track mosquitoes.
Report either a mosquito, report a bite,
and prevent mosquitoes.
Report a breeding site.
Welcome to the Mosquito Alert app.
Enables them to take pictures of mosquitoes, post them to the app. They go to our local public health department.
Ray has stepped up the mission to recruit citizen scientists throughout the St. Louis area.
So they invited me on to kind of elaborate the communication strategy for how are we doing the outreach. We're trying to raise awareness about this app, trying to get people to use it.
This demonstration with Missouri Botanical Gardens Green Resources Specialist Jean Ponzi is one of the ways they are getting the message out.
It's mosquito season 2025. This is a bucket lid, and we colored one segment of it orange to show that that's enough standing water for a mosquito to lay eggs in.
Mosquito Alert STL now has a catchy line for the surveillance mission.
Join the SWAT team. The mosquito lands on you. You whip out your phone, you photograph the mosquito, you swat the mosquito, and then you upload that photo.
St. Louis County can now track mosquito sightings
to reduce the likelihood of a threat and to reduce the impact.
If there's a serious mosquito problem, St. Louis County trucks spray to kill mosquitoes, but this is not widespread to avoid harming pollinators.
Mosquitoes are one kind of insect in a world where insects are really important. Controlling those pests ecologically helps protect our pollinators as it protects us.
Ray says citizen scientists should take their mission to protect their community very seriously.
Typically, and this is definitely true in Missouri, investment in public health surveillance for mosquitoes is very limited. So, for instance, St. Louis County is the only county in the state that actually has personnel in order to do full-scale surveillance that involves trapping, identifying mosquitoes, and also looking to see whether the pathogens that carry disease are present. All of the other 86 counties in Missouri don't have the resources to do that work.
We're very proud that St. Louis is the first city in the U.S. to be using Mosquito Alert as a citizen science project. It's in use all over Europe and in parts of Africa and the Caribbean.
Ray wants St. Louis to be a leader, so he's making the project part of his research at St. Louis University.
I've done some evaluation research around the Mosquito Alert STL project itself. What kind of impact are we having in terms of raising awareness about the app, trying to get people to use it? So doing surveys with people who we engage with at these different community events, people we engage with via social media, to get a sense of kind of what people are learning and the extent to which, how they're engaging with the project.
For original programming and award-winning content, explore hecmedia.org. Find all of your favorite genres, including the arts and sciences. Go in-depth with the latest research. Get insight into new technologies. Learn about breakthrough discoveries. Find it all in one place. Explore hecmedia.org.
History Spotlight, brought to you by HEC Media and the Missouri Historical Society.
Hello, I'm Dr. Jody Sowell, president of the Missouri Historical Society in St. Louis, and this is History Spotlight. Arthur Kennedy Jr. made history as a black speedboat champion, setting multiple records and leaving a lasting legacy in the sport. Public historian of the African American History Initiative, Cecily Hunter, shares how his passion for racing not only earned him international recognition, but also helped break barriers in competitive boating.
Not too many people can say that they've set 14 records, but Arthur Kennedy Jr., a black speedboat champion, can. Kennedy Jr. was born to Arthur Kennedy Sr. and Ruth L. Kennedy. At the tender age of 8 years old, he found his love for the sport and went on to have an impressive career for about 30 years, racing throughout the United States and even Europe. If you're wondering where his love for speedboat racing came from, it began when he watched his father, Kennedy Sr., race. Eventually, they'd even become a father and son dynamic duo and compete together. Arthur Kennedy Jr., who was also referred to as Butch, was destined for greatness, and others saw it too. Mark Spencer from Powerboat magazine wrote in May of 1992, Arthur Kennedy was to speedboat racing what Jackie Robinson was to baseball. They both broke the color barrier in their respective sports, but much more important than the hue of his skin, they were first-class competitors. Kennedy Jr. and two others, William R. Allen and Edward S. Langston Jr., founded St. Louis Outboard Club that was later renamed the Gateway Boating Club, Inc. In the exhibit at the Missouri History Museum, you can see a battery-powered model of a racing boat that was used by Kennedy Jr.
Next week on History Spotlight, discover the extraordinary life of Frank Kurtz, a St. Louis prodigy whose groundbreaking work shaped the future he once predicted.
To learn more about the Missouri Historical Society, visit mohistory.org. Later on Spotlight, celebrate National Ice Cream Day with Icy's Plain and Fancy.
If you've visited a major museum, zoo, or other international cultural attraction, including the 3 largest aquariums in the world, there's a good chance your experience, at least in part, was thanks to some folks from here in St. Louis. Local design company PGAV is the creative mastermind behind everything from the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum to the 5-story aquarium in Abu Dhabi to the updated World's Fair exhibit at the Missouri History Museum.
Most of what we do here at PJV is catered for guests. We want the guests to have the best possible time and to experience whatever that storyline it is that we're being asked to create. Anything from creating a different world, a different setting, to just like in the case of the History Museum, creating something, presenting something in a historical context that a guest has never seen before, especially being something that was built in 1904, and so taking imagery from the time period and recreating it in a way that gives the guests an experience that they haven't had before.
Well, I think this is really a new, engaging version of the World's Fair exhibit. We've taken the large model and added projection mapping to it to sort of liven the space, liven the site. I think there are new stories as well, really digging into the past and looking at some of the new stories that hadn't been told before. And so really giving people a different perspective about the World's Fair exhibit.
They attribute their success to knowing what makes a good story and how to tell it.
We do a lot of research up front to understand what really visitors are looking for, number one, in engaging with experiences. We use our experience across all of our market sectors, so everything from theme parks to museums to zoos and aquariums. We use all of that knowledge to help inform our work. But ultimately, it's really finding the right deliverable for those stories, using the best tool to deliver the best story.
In the case of the World's Fair exhibit, that means finding modern ways for visitors to relate to an event that took place more than a century ago.
So there's a touchscreen component to this around the model. There are 4 different touchscreens, and it allows you to scroll through, read about different buildings, different parts of the fair. Information that may have been there before, but now it's a little bit more technology driven this time around. There's also a massive 16 by 18 foot projection screen above the model, and this projects old imagery from 1904 during the World's Fair.
But by far their biggest project to date is located far, far away from the arch in Abu Dhabi.
The biggest project that I've worked on was the most recent SeaWorld Abu Dhabi project. That was about a 10-year long project that we worked on. It's the world's largest aquarium. We were being asked to do things that we'd never done before, things that weren't ever done before, especially just in the grand scale of this massive aquarium. But PJV had its hand on pretty much every element of the design, from the actual building of the aquarium all the way to the different shapes of the tanks.
The designers say they plan to keep telling these immersive stories, from the future of the world's aquariums to the history of the World's Fair.
We've had World's Fair exhibits up in the past. Our last World's Fair exhibit had opened in 2004, and we closed it in 2023. So it was up for 19 years. That exhibit was kind of ready to come down. We also wanted to update our storytelling and tell new stories about the fair, tell stories that you maybe have heard before in different ways. So we reimagined this entire World's Fair space, and really what we wanted to do is help people both relive the wonder of the 1904 World's Fair and re-examine the complexity of the 1904 World's Fair. It was really about drilling down into those stories that we know people expect to hear, and how can we change those stories, tell with new angles. How can we approach them differently? Or how can we look for artifacts and photographs and things that can help us to tell news stories? And how can we get people to feel like they're experiencing, the wonder of the fair in some ways? So be thinking about things like ice cream cones and Ferris wheels and all those stories you've heard about, at the same time that you're thinking about things like the Philippine Village, where over 1,000 people were brought and had their lives and bodies put on display. Because the World's Fair is both of those things at the same time. So in order to do that, we got out over 200 artifacts from our own collections to help us tell those stories. And we also created this scale model that shows, every building, every pathway that was at the World's Fair. It's at about a 1 to 400 scale, and it helps you be able to orient yourself at the fair and figure out where all these stories that you've heard about came from. Every 15 minutes or so, a new overlay comes down, and it's sort of a Google Earth image of what's there today. So you can see some landmarks pretty easily, 4064 and Skinker, and then you can start to, place houses and things at the zoo and stuff like that. So you can really get a sense of where the fair was in St. Louis. We were able to animate some sort of dynamism into the model. There's little people sort of walking around. There's one of the hands on the floral clock in front of the agriculture building actually moves. There's trains running along the tracks. There's hot air balloons. There's boats in the Grand Basin. There's birds flying overhead. There's cloud cover. So there's all sorts of things happening on the models. The fair is one of the most important events in St. Louis's history, right? It changed Forest Park. You know, people didn't go sledding down Art Hill until after the World's Fair, after that land was cleared. It turned that sort of western half of the park into the space where now there's an art museum and a zoo and a history museum and a golf course and all those things that people like to do in that half of the park. It's something that affected the built environment in St. Louis. It's something that affected the water in St. Louis. It's something that still has an impact here today and still affects all of our lives.
You can find the stories featured in today's show along with past episodes and more at hecmedia.org/spotlight.
In Driving the Green Book, award-winning broadcaster Alvin Hall takes us on a journey through America's haunted racial past with the legendary Green Book as our guide.
The Green Book, whose official name is the Negro Motorist Green Book, was created in 1936 by Victor Hugo Green and his wife Alma, who at the time lived in Harlem. Victor was a postman in New Jersey, Hackensack to be specific. During the summer, he and his wife would take trips to go to Richmond, Virginia to visit Alma's relatives. And on their way there, they would encounter aggravations. They could not use bathrooms. They could not buy food. They could not stop at a place to sleep. Victor became frustrated about this and decided to create a publication to help people find the services they wanted when they were traveling. At first, he went among his friends, gathered information, and so the first Green Book really focused on primarily New York, Connecticut, New Jersey, and a little of New England. The next one expanded upon that. And then by 1938, people started to hear about the Green Book, and it gradually started to spread across America. It was published every April or May at the beginning of the summer holiday season so that people could use it when they were on the road.
This was such an integral part of Black life, especially traveling, and yet so many people don't even know that it ever existed, including a lot of Black Americans. How did you find it?
I found out about the Green Book when I was on an airplane, not even in a car. When I fly around, I typically like to buy magazines, so I buy a stack and I'll go through them and read them and leave them on the plane. And in this case, I saw a little sidebar that mentioned the Negro Motorist Green Book. This was in about 2015. I thought, what is this? I've never heard of this publication. So I said to myself, when I get back to New York, I would go to the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, and I would see what it was about.
So the Green Book is named for its founder, Victor Green.
Victor worked as a postman in Hackensack, New Jersey. At the time, there were two postmen's unions, one for white postmen and one for Black postmen. Victor was able to tap into people that he knew in both of those unions, and they would tell him about places in cities where they delivered mail that would be appropriate for his travel guide.
It must have been so cool to just peel away the layers as you took this journey.
It's not just peeling back the story of the Green Book. It's when I'm out talking to people about it, gathering the personal stories, hearing their memories of that time, families who recall using the Green Book. One of my favorite stories was told to me by Hezekiah Jackson in Birmingham, Alabama. He would say he would be at home and his mother would be all at church and somebody would come and knock on the door and said, can we borrow that Green Book? And he said, well, when Mama comes back home, and they kept it in a part of the house, and people would come over where they were taking trips to visit relatives in New York or Detroit, and they would want that Green Book because, as he said about his family, when we travel, my granddaddy had the Green Book and he had his pocket Bible.
It was that important.
It was that important.
To find out how the famous Rockefellers are involved in marketing this book, watch the full interview at hecmedia.org. For more St. Louis stories, subscribe to the HEC YouTube channel. Spotlight STL from HEC Media.
Blast churning made-to-order nitro ice creams at negative 320 degrees. Icy's Plain and Fancy is pushing the culinary boundaries.
The idea for Icy's Plain and Fancy came from basically high-end kitchens. We sort of saw an opportunity to push the boundary of what people are doing with ice cream and with this concept and with the nitrogen. It shortens the process from something that could take a half hour, 45 minutes. We can do it in about 45 seconds. So now you can hear the mixer working. And if you want to see kind of where we're at this point, and what I have is basically that's the start of the ice cream, but you can see that it's sort of frozen. It's stuck on the edges. It's got hard spots, and that's not going to be really good when you eat it. So basically what we'll do is we'll spin it up a little more, and I'll torch the sides, melting it a little bit, and you can see inside the mixer where it's going to start to pull off. It'll start to come loose like that, and then in it goes. You get it loose from the edges. And then this is weird to people because basically I want it to stick again, but not as much. So what I'll do is I'll spin it up a little faster and add just a little bit of nitrogen in it, and spinning itself around, sort of like taffy almost. And that's really part of the key to the texture that we get. And you got fresh made ice cream.
Serving up traditional favorites, cocktail ice cream creations, and innovative flavors, Chef Max is the master of nitro mixology.
Mint chip is one that I wanted to keep very nostalgic and like kid-like, so we used the mint syrup instead of using like fresh mint and stuff. So it's bright green with big chunks of chocolate chip. We put that in the bowl, and then we add liquid nitrogen, which is about a 1-to-1 ratio. It takes about as much liquid nitrogen as volume of product to freeze it. We take that and we add it to the mixers while they're running, and it pretty much instantly freezes everything.
We're selling something that not only is a delicious sweet treat, but it's also something that comes with a tremendous amount of nostalgia baked in with it. In general, people have a very close relationship with things like ice cream, with things like cookies, things that bring them back to their childhood. It's a lifestyle brand. It's not just the ice cream, it's the experience that you have when you come here.
And that experience and the name Icy's Plain and Fancy comes from a frozen desserts cookbook authored by the Victorian Queen of Ices, Mrs. Agnes Bertha Marshall. The self-made English culinary entrepreneur was one of the first to suggest using liquid nitrogen to create ice cream.
So this lady is so cool, and this book has this weird title, Icy's Plain and Fancy. Totally fits. Like, the building's Victorian, we love this lady. The name is weird, but it's like weird in a good way. We really like it, and we're weird. We're gonna be weird and different. So it sort of just was like, that's it. We kind of came up with the name and the location in the same day. Everything was very serendipitous.
The opportunity that we saw in this space, not just that it's a beautiful building from the exterior, it's in a neighborhood that's one of the fastest growing neighborhoods in the city of St. Louis, is the Shaw neighborhood.
It's really vibrant, it's really eclectic, there's lots going on, and there's room to grow here. There's room for us to be a part of the heart of the neighborhood.
Next week, it's almost St. Louis Art Fair time, so we'll begin introducing you to the creatives, plus hundreds of rarely seen images of the Mississippi River. Thanks for watching Spotlight. Join us next Sunday at 9:30 a.m. on KPLR 11.